Bună dimineața tuturor!
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tatiana Puiu, country representative of the Freedom House. Welcome to this event to launch the report on access to information. So, Access to Information Index measuring transparency of public institutions in the Republic of Moldova. To begin with, I would like to make several logistical comments. So the event is organized as a hybrid event with the physical presence of speakers and on Zoom platform, where those that have confirmed their participation are connected. We shall facilitate the interpretation into Romanian and English by choosing interpretation channel from the interpretation globe. And also you can follow us on airliveprivesk.eu as well as on social media. To ask your questions, you can write them in chat or announce us that you would like to take the floor. Today's event includes a presentation on Freedom House on information, access to information in the Republic of Moldova, and we'll look at the existing legal and other issues which impede access to information, to public information. So the report actually has a series of the results of comprehensive analysis of the transparency of public institutions in Moldova, which had been based on an original methodological approach that had been delivered or developed by the authors of this report. Within the analysis, we have taken into account the best practices, international practices, and the best standards. I take this opportunity to thank all public authorities for being with us and for having confirmed their presence. I would like to remind you that we have over 50 representatives of institutions connected now via Zoom. Another important clarification is that this event is part of the project Media to Support Democracy and supported by the United States International Development Agency, USAID, and the British Embassy in Chisinau, and implemented by Internews and Freedom House. Having said these, I would like to invite you to begin, and I would like to offer the floor to John Reardon, Deputy Chief of USAID Moldova, who will connect online. And thank you very much for your presence, even virtual presence online. Thank you still, and thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Great to see everyone. I will be speaking in English. I think there's translation, so I'll pause for 2 seconds and let people get their translation ready. It's a rainy morning here in Chisinau, and I hope everyone's staying dry. All right. So I'm delighted to be here today with you to discuss the current media environment in Moldova, and specifically what needs to be done to improve access to information for all Moldovans, and the media in particular. I would like to thank Freedom House and our colleagues for their work in advancing work in the media and that related legislation. USAID looks forward to today's presentation on access to information. The report will not only offer an overview of the current situation, but also an outline of recommendations for moving forward. As many of you know, USAID contributes to the development of the Moldovan media through its Media Enabling Democracy, Inclusion, and Accountability in Moldova, MEDIA-M program. The program aims to expand citizens' access to a variety of perspectives and to foster a media sector that is more resilient to political and financial pressures. During her recent trip to Moldova, USAID Administrator Power met with a number of investigative journalists whose reporting and media organizations have broken numerous stories about corruption in Moldova. The administrator and the journalists discussed the challenges of independent media and what they face here in Moldova. One question that stood out for me was related to access to information, which is essential to ensuring the transparency and accountability of all public institutions. USAID views the media as a needed partner to catalyze citizen engagement. Under our new country strategy for Moldova, we aim to help promote demand-driven governance and foster a sense of civic identity. Media plays a critical role in informing citizens while also providing the public with more effective means of giving voice to their concerns and priorities. The work Moldova media has become even more critical in the context of COVID-19 pandemic. The government and local media continue to grapple with the new challenges to ensure that the public receives timely and objective information necessary to safeguard the health and prosperity of the Moldovan society. The pandemic's putting additional strain on the operating environment for the independent media. According to yet another recent study by Freedom House, the pandemic has fueled a crisis for democracy around the world, and the media freedoms are hit the hardest. Burdens such as major cuts to revenue streams and logistics and safety issues related to remote and distance reporting are leading to a decreased access to information. Ensuring citizens have a fundamental right to access information is not an easy task. It can only be achieved if the Moldovan government, civil society, and the media community work together in a transparent and participatory process. I know just recently to cancel the need for the media to register as a personal data operator to access state registries containing personal data. We welcome this change, as it should improve access to information for all the media and for investigative journalists in particular. But there is much work to be done still, including the adoption of a new improved access to information law. Finally, I encourage active engagement in a principled way with the Moldovan government and parliament at this critical time to ensure that democratic values, including media freedom and access to information, are recognized and enforced. Thank you very much. Mulțumesc frumos.
Mulțumesc.
Thank you to you. We apologize for these technical hiccups. Well, these are the realities of the events organized in an online format. Now I would like to offer the floor to Corina Cepoi, Director of Internews in Moldova, to moderate the main session for which we have come together here. Corina, please take the floor. The floor is yours. Well, I would like to thank everyone who's here with us today. Indeed, we are the partners of this project together with Freedom House, and it is a pleasure for us that Media benefits from the expertise of the experts whom we have today, as well as to benefit from the cooperation with Freedom House. And I would like to mention that today we have a partner in this project, one more partner, it's the Center for Independent Journalism, and we are engaged within a period of time in the changes that are taking place in Moldova. We are glad that our supporters have engaged in this period of time to support the media. And after I have read the report, as Mr. Reardon mentioned, actually the issues that are signaled to us by our partners are exactly the ones which had been seen and had been capitalized on in the report. And this is why I would like to move forward with the presentation of the report with the experts, one international and the local expert, to make the presentation of the report. And I would like to thank them for having applied the new methodology and to share with us what they have found out. And I would like to offer the floor to, well, David is one of the reports, David Shicilo, and he's also he has the role of the assistant professor at the law faculty and administration in the Warsaw University, and also has an experience of expert review and cooperations in Central and Eastern Europe. So his engagement is very relevant for us because he has got this professional experience and academic experience as well.
Thank you very much. It's a very important day for us, for the authors of this report, me and Stella, who will join our presentation at the later stage. It's also a privilege to be here in person in Chisinau in the special times. I would like to briefly introduce you to the main messages from our report on measuring transparency of public institutions in Moldova. It was clear for us from the beginning that transparency is a challenge for public institutions in Moldova. It was clear that there are significant shortcomings and deficits, both in legal framework and in practice, of access to public information. And it was clear that there are significant challenges ahead of us. There is a need for significant major reform in this area in Moldova. However, every reform attempt, every initiative should begin with comprehensive diagnosis of state of play of the situation in the field. And that's why we delivered this report. That's why we developed the methodology that is original input, that is, of course, based on international standards and best practices, but it's tailored to the specific situation of Moldova, specific conditions in Moldova. My story with my personal story with measuring transparency of public institutions in Moldova started already in 2015 when I arrived here with OECD Sigma program, conducting the baseline measurement of public administration in Moldova against the principles of public administration developed by Sigma. One of those principles relate to the transparency of public institutions, to access to public information. Already then, it was clear that there are significant challenges in this field. But the nature of this assessment was that it concentrated on only major general issues. We needed more in-depth analysis of the situation in this field. That's why we developed this this methodology, this new approach to measuring transparency of public institutions. And let me start now with presentation of the major takes, major messages from the from this report. So first of all, how did we measure transparency in Moldova, transparency of public institutions? The main feature of this approach was to combine assessing the legislation with measuring how this legislation is implemented in practice. Also giving more weight to practice than to legislative framework. We wanted to avoid a trap of focusing only on the law in books by focusing also or mainly on the law in action. Otherwise, we would end up like some international rankings measuring transparency only by assessing the legislation. For example, this famous global right to information ranking shows that that is concentrated only on assessment of the legislation. It shows that the two most transparent countries in the world are Afghanistan and Mexico, while the least transparent country in the world is Austria, and one of the least transparent is Germany. If we focus only on legislation, we unfortunately see only a small part of the picture. That's why in our study we combined assessment of the legislation with measuring, assessing to what extent what is guaranteed by the law is secured also in practice. So we measure quality of legislative framework, especially compliance with some international standards. We are lucky that there are already some international standards on how the legislation for access to public information should be constructed. There is Tromsø Convention that eventually entered into force. There are Sigma standards that I had pleasure to contribute to, and there are also some standards developed by international NGOs. But in addition to this, we measured performance of public institutions with regard to what is called proactive transparency. Proactive transparency is at the heart of effective system of access to public information, because it's about culture among public institutions, culture of transparency, culture ensuring that information is shared proactively without even being asked by the citizens. And finally, we also included into our study performance of public bodies in handling public information requests. So all three pillars of effective system of transparency were measured within the framework of our study. What are the results? What are the conclusions of this assessment? So we decided to, of course, combine qualitative analysis with some presentation of results in a tangible, in a clear, illustrative form by presenting, by developing a composite indicator, composite index of transparency, consisting of these three mentioned earlier elements. First element is legislation. It stands for 40% of the total value of the index, total score. And the results of the assessment of the legislation are quite clear. There are significant major shortcomings in the current legislative framework. These shortcomings relate to 5 main issues. First of all, incomprehensive institutional scope. Institutional scope meaning what institutions, what bodies are subject to transparency requirement. And in this context, that is central to effective transparency system. In this context, the current law does not provide sufficient coverage of transparency requirements, especially, but not only, the status of various private law bodies, meaning companies, not necessarily financed from the state budget, not necessarily established by the state, but controlled by the state. Their status is not fully clear. It is not fully clear whether, to what extent they are subject to transparency requirements. Secondly, there are very limited requirements on proactive transparency. So the catalog of information to be disclosed proactively by public institutions is very narrow compared to catalogs in other countries. It is extremely modest, and this will be also reflected in the results of the measurement of the actual level of proactive transparency. But it is clear that what is in the law right now does not meet even minimum international standards in this matter. Then there is a technical, but in practice very important issue: lack of clear rules on imposing fees for access to information. There are some general principles, but they do not secure citizens from bearing excessive financial burden in the context of getting access to information. There is also an issue that I would say is a major deficit in the current law. So flawed mechanism of enforcement, appeal, and sanctions for violations of the right to information. This is the area, this is the issue where some major reform is required to strengthen supervision over compliance of public institutions with transparency requirements. Because what is guaranteed formally by law is one thing. Another thing, equally important, is to what extent we are capable of supervising, of overseeing compliance with these requirements, and also sanctioning the cases of violations of the right to information. To make it, to put it simply, this does not work well in case of Moldova, what we will also see in our assessment of the practice. And finally, we detected a problem that was partially solved by the case law of the Supreme Court of Justice, but not fully, which is the problem of poor harmonization of the law on access to information with the newly adopted administrative code. I would say that adoption of administrative code was, of course, important development, important step forward towards international standards of good administration. But much more could have been done to ensure that this new law is better harmonized with legislation that was already in place, including law on access to information, to avoid discrepancies, to avoid any potential conflict. So the general assessment of the legislative framework in numeric terms is that only around 55%, in around 55%, this current legislative framework complies with minimum standards that were established in our methodology, which is clear message that significant reforms in this matter are needed. So any reform should start with also a revision of the legislative framework. And for assessment of the practice and for our main messages from assessment of the practice, I would pass the floor to Stella, who would present it in more detail.
Thank you so much, sir, for this review of the first part of the presentation. Now, Stella Pavlova will continue the presentation. She is an local expert known. We've worked with her on a number of occasions, and actually on the page of Media Amp and Freedom House pages, you can see other researches done by her prior to this. Now, we benefit from her local experience as expert and as a person who worked in the central public administration. I mean, she has all sorts of experiences. She worked with local international organizations. The floor is yours, Stella. Thank you so much, Karina. I will talk about Pillar 2, proactive transparency, and Pillar 3, access to information upon request. So this is the practical aspect of this. I should tell you that proactive transparency is at the basis of ensuring the right to information. And even though the legal framework should provide for a comprehensive list of information that needs to be published proactively, the limited number of this information that is included in it should not discourage institutions to voluntarily make public as much information as possible proactively. Now, the analysis of practices in this regard was based on studying the web pages of public institutions when it comes to the availability of key information and the organizational framework, normative financial frameworks, as well as information that refers to the activities and their initiatives. Now, if we are to talk about the sample on which our analysis was based, and now for the purpose of this analysis, we have identified 50 a sample of 50 public institutions. And here I will, let me show you that we have examined web pages of 9 ministries, 12 institutions from ministries, 4 institutions from the government, 10 autonomous authorities, 5 central bodies which are not part of the government administration, and 10 district councils. Though now the institutions have been selected randomly. 9 ministries, I mean here, before the reform that has taken place, and the 2 ministries, Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education, have been split further down the road. They were taken as one ministry, Ministry of Education and Research, and Ministry of Labor. Now, categories of information that have been verified. This information has been analyzed on the web pages of public institutions. And I should mention that, as it was mentioned by David, there is no universal catalog of all types of information that has to be published proactively. However, when developing the criteria that were used for this analysis of the web pages, we took into account the international standards. Generally, the outcomes of the analysis of the web pages of those 50 public institutions at different levels of public administration have shown a reduced level of proactive transparency. I mean, meaning the financial aspects, which include information regarding public procurement, management of goods and salaries. Well, this is the biggest problem at the level of actually most of the public authorities. And here you can see the list of information, categories of information that have been reviewed. I will not read those. They are in the report as well. Now, only 8 institutions out of 50 have accumulated more than 50% of the maximum scoring. And here you can see public institutions which have passed the 50% threshold: Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Justice, Ministry of Internal Affairs, Agency of Environment, Public Services Agency, National Agency for Energy Regulation, Presidency and Parliament of the Republic of Moldova. Now, the biggest or the best performer, actually, when it comes to transparency, belongs to the Ministry of Justice, which has published on its official webpage all the categories of information except for information regarding competitions on public procurement, ongoing ones, and the salaries of the leadership and of structural subdivisions. Ministry of Internal Affairs and Environmental Agency also published on their webpage most of the categories of information, except of those regarding procurement competitions, announcements on the results of procurement competitions, and the information regarding registries and databases, and salaries of the managers of these authorities. Now, the most modest performance when it comes to transparency, practical transparency, belongs to the District Council of Salaries, on the page of which we can only see the organogram and the information on vacancies. The Anti-Doping Agency, where we have found information regarding the organizational chart as well as legal framework which regulates the activity of this agency. And the Moldova agency, forest agency, on whose webpage we could only see the organogram of the agency, information regarding legal framework, and some information regarding functions and available services for citizens. Now, given that the regulation in the area of proactive transparency of public institutions is very limited, the government decree regarding official pages of central administration on the network, internet network, have some obligations on public authorities when it comes to making public data about the organization. Public institutions are not available to provide voluntarily a higher level of transparency so that they would compensate for this deficiencies of the law. Now, most of them fulfill their responsibilities within the limit of the law, but without really being willing to make public information to citizens. Now, when it comes to Pillar 3, access to information upon request or on demand. Now, in order to assess the openness of institutions when it comes to providing public information, we have requested standardized, we have sent to them standardized request of information which focused on information regarding public interest. And they are about major public interest. Now, requests of information have been sent on behalf of the NGO Lawyers for Human Rights. This is an organization which for many years has strived to make systemic changes when it comes to access to information. And the requests have been sent both on paper with signature and stamp, as it is obviously requested by public authorities, and sent through a recommended letter. And they were also sent through the vreuinfo.md platform. This is a platform which has been developed, and it is actually owned by this organization, which helps citizens request information and view and comment information requests of other people, as well as make public both information requests as well as the answers that it receives from public authorities. Now, we have submitted standardized requests to 50 public institutions at different levels of the administration, which have been included into the sample for the analysis of the web pages. To that end, we have developed 3 standardized questions. We purposely put here the way we have submitted the request so that you could see that I mean, look, they are referring to the law, and a bit later you'll understand why we made that. Now, the questions were about salaries, salary benefits, top-ups of the salaries and the premiums of the managers and of institutions and subdivisions, annual procurement plans, and the copies of reports regarding the procurement procedures, and information regarding subsidies, grants, donations offered to legal entities in 2021. Now, when we compare this to the proactive transparency degree, when it comes to this area, we have also assessed the openness of some suppliers of information, and namely state institutions and judicial companies. Even though they are not part of the system of public administration, they should be under public control because they benefit from subsidies and transfers from the state. Now, to this end, we have submitted standardized questions to 10 state companies and 5 joint stock companies. The questions referred to the procurement plans, public procurement plans, as well as the reports regarding the results of public procurement and the value of budget allocations and whether they received subsidies and transfers from the budget in 2020 and 2021. Even though the quality of answers and their comprehensiveness hasn't been impressive, the performance of public institutions regarding the review of data requests is a reduced one. And some of the authorities still have shown a higher level of transparency. And here, let me refer to the following authorities. We have here the Agency for Interventions and Payment for Agriculture, which provided detailed answers to all the questions. Moreover, given the big volume of information, available information in digital format, this agency actually has shared the files with us and allowed us to visit the premises of the institution in order to make available all the information on a USB device. Court of Accounts also offered answers, detailed answers to all the questions. Well, on top of that, a representative of the Court of Accounts contacted us through all possible means in order to come to them and provide this information on a USB device. Now, the Ministry of Economy and Infrastructure also offered to us information or answers to all of the questions that we have sent to them. The answer of the Ministry of Economy has been big. It's on 49 pages. I mean, you can imagine the volume of data. District councils of Drokya and Kantemir are the only ones, the only public authorities that offered answers, comprehensive answers to all the questions. And about the presidency of Moldova, as well as the National Authority of Integrity, provided detailed answers to the questions about the wages of staff, subsidies, grants and donations, except for look, they didn't answer the questions regarding information regarding the results of the procurement procedures in 2020-2021. Now, when it comes, they only gave information about the procurement plan as well as the reports regarding contract execution. Now, at the same time, I should mention that there have been institutions which did not answer our data request. And here I will refer to the Ministry of Education, Culture and Research, Ministry of Health, Labor and Social Protection, and Prosecution General. These are central authorities. We haven't received answers from 5 of 10 district councils that we have selected in order to analyze this issue of providing information upon request. And we haven't received answers to our request from 3 state companies and 2 joint stock companies.
So you have seen them, who they are. The responsiveness. Well, further on, I would like to refer a little bit to different approaches of information suppliers, information providers, and we have made a little comparison. Different approaches of the information suppliers with regard to the information that had been requested. So here we have made a little screenshot on the basis of the responses from the authorities, and you will see that the intervention for payments and interventions in agriculture that I referred to a bit earlier have provided all the information, and they have opted for this external service of sharing information, and they have provided this information on a USB stick. And the District Council of Cajul has informed us that the amount of information that we have requested is way too big. It's not available in electronic format, and they have invited us, if we wanted to learn information that we were requesting, they invited to us to come over to the District Council and get all the information that we needed on site. Another approach of the information providers on salaries and bonuses to the salaries and premiums which the public authorities have received. So here you will see a response uh, from the staff of the president that has provided the information in a table on salaries, increments to the salaries, bonuses, and so on, and explained that the staff, the personnel, does not benefit from increments to the salary because of conditions, hard conditions of work, and so on. And also here you will see a little excerpt from the answer from the Ministry of Finance, which had informed us that the information that we were requesting about salaries are personal data, and they fall under the incidence of the provisions of the law on personal data protection, as well as the labor code, where it reads that salary is confidential information, and this information could be provided only with the consent of the beneficiary. Moreover, well, after all, they have admitted and said that this information could be viewed on the National Integrity Agency, although in the formula that we have asked it, this information cannot be viewed on the ANI page, because there you can see only the total amount, not the, and we have requested the information to be divided or by per month, the wages per month. So different approaches of information providers as regards the plans of public procurement. So here you can see the Ministry of Economy and Infrastructure had provided information, all the information which we have requested, including decisions of awarding a procurement contract where it had been clearly indicated that it had been an open tender, which economic operator was the winner of that tender, and so on. So all the information has been received in an annex to the letter. Compared to the response from the National Financial Markets Commission, well, you can see here that the Commission makes references and gives us links to their website as regards the plan, their procurement plans, and the reports on the monitoring of the execution of the contracts, including references to tender.gov.md. But we also asked for other information, such as the winners of these procurements, and they were not able to provide it to us. They only made references to their official website. As regards subsidies, grants, and donations provided to legal entities or budget allocations received from the public institutions. So this is an information note provided to us by the District Council of Dorokia for 2020 and 2021, exactly the way we have requested it, and who's the beneficiary, and when were these subsidies awarded, and the amount, compared to the answer received from the Mileshti Mich enterprise, which provided only the amount and the amount that has been received. I would also like to refer to weird arguments for not providing public information. I mean, we find it weird. And here I would like to refer a bit to the answer provided to us by the Minister of Internal Affairs, which in point 1 of our application, which refers to salaries, increments, and premiums and bonuses and so on, they mentioned that So besides saying that this is personal data and they can be processed only with the consent of the data subject, the Ministry of Internal Affairs said that actually the request to be provided with information does not comply with the provisions, legal provisions, because the information that had been requested had been excessive. And they could provide this information on basis of an application. But if we provide details, concluding details, which would allow the ministry to identify that we shall use this information with a lot of diligence.
Un alt furnizor de informații care
Another information provider where we have received an argumentation of the refusal to be granted access to information was the Ministry of Defense. So the Ministry of Defense argued that our request does not justify the provision of the data that we have requested, and in order to benefit from this information, we need to identify which is the specific purpose for which we request the disclosure of this data, the category and the amount of the personal data, the legal or the normative framework which underpins our information request. Although before we have indicated that we have made clear reference to provisions, and when we have submitted this on behalf of the association, we made reference to Article 34 of the Constitution, to law on access to information, and Article 10 of the European Human Rights Convention, European Human Rights Convention. So. And also to ensure confidentiality of the processing data, this we cannot ensure. So a similar answer was received from the Secretariat of the Parliament that also mentioned that the information we are requesting have limited accessibility, and we need to specify the exact purpose and the legal framework underpinning our request, and to prove the legitimate interest or the presence of certain conditions on the personal data protection law, and to offer guarantees to ensure the security and confidentiality of and that we will not use the data in contrary purposes and undetermined third persons which are not authorized to with the data. So other replies were the Environmental Protection Inspectorate, and we also the representatives of this public institution. And we have mentioned that they've mentioned that this is personal data, and given that this request of information refers to civil servants, they equally ensure the protection of the rights and freedoms, fundamental freedoms of the civil servants. And they have mentioned that our application is not or lacks arguments and lacks foundation, and they said that they could share the information with us only if we provide them with further details about the purpose of the use of information and so on. And the last information provider is the Broadcasting Council. As far as you know, we have submitted our application on behalf of the Lawyers for Human Rights with on paper basis with seal and signature. And so you will see that the requests have been submitted on the 25th of June, and you will see in the first screenshot the Broadcasting Council answered the same date. Probably they had a template of an answer by which they have informed, and they have treated our application through the provisions of the administrative code, and they have they have qualified our information request as a petition, and they have responded to us what else we need to present in order to, in order for our petition to be reviewed. And they gave us a term of 2 days during which we should provide the further information, otherwise they would not respond. And they have replied to us in writing after we have submitted an application on paper basis. They were very inventive in their response. They also treated our application for information as a petition. And they said that the application is submitted by a legal entity, by the NGO Lawyers for Human Rights, and the signatory that signed the request for information, access to information, and it was managed that it was a director, and they have then requested to provide a proxy for the director of the association to be able to provide the information. And then again, they gave us 2 days, otherwise they would not respond to our request, and they haven't. Afterwards, they haven't responded. Limited responsiveness of public authorities to information requests corresponds to modest results that have been achieved as a result of the analysis of the degree of proactive transparency, thus highlighting a systemic issue of a developed culture of transparency and a bigger concern referred to the understanding and the interpretation of the legal framework which regulates access to information. The arguments which are quoted as the basis for the refusal of the authorities are discussed. So this is when they approved the restriction of access to public information of the public authority, they disregard the public interest side here. A positive aspect, I would say, is that the majority of the public institutions and authorities respond within the regulated timeline, 15 days. And in order to achieve a higher level of transparency, we think that it's not enough to answer within the timeline when you provide a refusal, because that is the violation to the right to information. Thank you. Thank you, Stella.
Thank you very much, Stella. This is interesting. So let me call on those who are online to put down the questions in order to ask them after the presentation. Now, let me give the floor to David Shachilo, because he will close this presentation and this evaluation.
Thank you.
You have the floor, sir.
And considering all the problems that were presented by Stella, considering also what I mentioned about the deficits in the legal framework, it's not a surprise that the total score is far from satisfactory, far from giving a positive assessment of the situation in the field. So it's 46, only 46 points out of 100 points possible. This is, of course, the first measurement, baseline measurement, and the idea of the whole report and assessment was to develop a methodology that would enable us to measure, hopefully, progress every year. So obviously, this point of departure is rather low. The bar is low for now, but let's hope that there is definitely, looking from the bright side, there is definitely a room for improvement, and we hope to record this improvement in the next rounds of assessment. But in order to save more time for discussion, I would like to just take this diagnosis as a point of departure for discussion about the way forward. And of course, doing this diagnosis is the easier part of the exercise. More difficult is to find a way forward. And in our report, we focus on three major directions of the changes required, major streams of the potential reform in this area. It is clear, first of all, for us that new law on access to public information should be the first step, the step that is required to start thinking about improvement in practice. For that purpose, you need a legislative framework that meets the international standards, that promotes a high level of transparency. But moving towards more practical challenges, we are fully aware that new law is not sufficient. It should be combined with also especially strengthening the institutional framework, namely supervision over the compliance with transparency requirements. And this is the area where I feel particularly comfortable speaking about international practice, about solutions from other countries, because this is the area where there are some developments internationally that bring some positive messages, that bring some hope, I guess, how to make supervision over compliance with the right to information working well. The major vehicle to serve this purpose is considering creation of independent supervisory body. This is an initiative this is an idea that has been implemented already by around 15 European countries, including many post-socialist countries in Western Balkans, in Central and Eastern Europe. Just recently, I had pleasure together with Primoz to assist successfully revision of the law on free access to information in Serbia. Serbia is a country where this kind of body was established as the first in the Western Balkans, with really major success stories, with major improvements and victories achieved towards progressing in transparency. And I believe that this is the one of the possible strategies to follow, of course, with many caveats, because we know already from international experience what is essential in terms of status, powers of this body to make it effective. And finally, the third recommendation is the maybe least tangible but important recommendation about fostering the culture of transparency among public institutions. What requires active role of the government, promoting conditions for greater transparency of public institutions, support in a form of training, developing capacities of public information officers, creating technical preconditions in a form of open data or access to information portals, and so on. So these are the three, let's say, clusters of the necessary reforms that I believe would significantly improve the situation and allow in some time in future to record significant progress in this matter, improvement of of the rating that was presented today. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to our discussion right now.
Absolutely. We still have a couple of respondents on this panel. Some of them are not with us, but online. Eu aș vrea să
I'd like to get back to the list and agenda of speakers for the next couple of minutes. And specifically, you've mentioned the important role of the Parliament, given the new legal packages, which should contribute to the improvement of the situation. Because when it comes to the good laws that we thought were good, they're not good anymore. They're old, and they do not comply with the current requirements regarding access to information. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Liliana Nicolescu Onofrei. She is the chairwoman, chief of the Parliamentary Committee for Culture, Education, Research, Youth, Sport, and Mass Media. Hopefully, she will give us an answer. I'll give an answer to this. I'll start by thanking colleagues who worked on this report. Obviously, it is quite sad to see the results that talk about such a low degree of proactive transparency of institutions. And for me, as a person who, before the public function, was in the civil society, and I needed information of public interest, I understand the things from both parts of the table, because a lot of the information for which colleagues from press, but also civil society and other citizens, according to the law of Moldova, they lose a lot of time to obtain this information, and they could, from the very outset, receive information or response when it comes to open data and a higher degree of transparency of institutions. And obviously, it's about the empowerment, because very often, as colleagues were presented in the report, the web pages of institutions are not at all friendly. And even though there is information on them, sometimes you feel that they are structured in a way that it is very hard for the public to understand anything on them. Now, of course, it is very important for the access to the information request to be offered in due course, and I understand how difficult, and even in the current situation, and we in the Parliament not often have been providing the information in due course. Sometimes it is about the lack of communication, efficient communication. In other cases, it is about data that indeed had to be better structures and available at any point in time. And we, as institution in the Parliament, we work with colleagues from the Secretariat so that we could improve the situation. But when it comes to what is presented in the report, and as aspects which require improvement to the laws, let me mention briefly that now on our agenda, one of the priorities is about a draft law, which is quite, I wouldn't say, has been sitting on a shelf for many years. Well, we're getting back to it now, and we have colleagues from here that contributed to it, Ms. Puyu and Ms. Pavlov and Mr. Vozian and colleagues from the Independent Press Association, the draft law, which is about amendments to a number of existing laws and codes when it comes to improving access to public information. Well, that is in our look now, and we will be putting it on the floor in the Parliament. We already have comments on the text presented from the legal department, and together with colleagues, we will be very seriously looking into this draft, specifically this amendments to the the will manage to actually 10 current laws, and not least when it comes to national program and the action program for the development of the mass media sector. It will also, we'll also have a specific activity regarding this program and action program that has been developed within an ample effort of the civil society, together with representatives of parliament and ministries and different institutions, public institutions. And in this program and action program, we also have aspects regarding the improvement of the area. Let me close by telling you that for us, this report is important. This is also a tool which is going to help us to take informed decisions, to be informed when we take decisions. And as I was saying, it is actually sad to see only two public administrations from the local level that have reacted out of all that we have, or to see a degree to which central public institutions have reacted to your requests. I think that we together need to make this effort so that when it comes to organizational culture for transparency, that needs to change. And of course, this needs empowerment of staff and of the technical aspects, but not least, it means to make them accountable when it comes to complying with the law. At least in the parliament team, we will strive so that we improve the legal framework and insist on monitoring tools and tracking that the legal framework is complied with. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Thank you for the report. It is really of big interest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. We're happy that this package of amendments to the laws is on the agenda of the parliamentary committee, because that would improve the situation in this pillar out of three, one pillar out of three, and we wish you good luck. And when it comes to the culture of access to information and promotion to the government and in the public institutions, our expert referred to the government, and we have a representative of the government, of the Ministry of Justice of Moldova, Ilan Rusu. He is a state secretary. And please, sir, you have the floor. What are your plans in this regard? Thank you, Corina. Thank you for this detailed report. This is a diagnostic of the way one ensures the presentation of information. And this is support for the authorities when they want to review the quality of communication with citizens. We're happy that the Ministry of Justice is among the authorities which have been scored as being the most transparent ones. At the same time, when it comes to the access to private data or access to information, at least when legally, we need to understand some of the activities of the Constitutional Court. The access to private data or compliance with the access to information, right? Access to information. Actually, when we have public interest on the one hand of access to data, and on the other hand, you have the right to private life or to privacy, or the right to the protection of a commercial secret. Now, in this regard, the Constitutional Court has ruled on the criteria that need to be taken into consideration by public authorities when one requests information and data, and if this information is part of the restricted data access, restricted data or private data area. Well, this subject is quite in an evolution and subject to the needs of the society. It migrates to a bigger need of transparency or to a lower one. Now, how these two competitive rights are actually part of the society. I agree with you that aspects related to double interpretation of the administrative code are a problem, or is a problem for the whole judiciary, because on the one hand, you apply the rule of the special law, and on the other hand, you understand that this administrative code is actually a special law in itself when it comes to access to information. Now, I should state that not only aspects related to access to information have been interpreted in a double way by the courts, but also there were other litigations regarding electoral area where the courts, having quite a limited time to rule about them, they have given different solutions. Some were saying that one needs a preliminary procedure. Others were saying that there's no such a need. Let me get back to findings of the Constitutional Court. The court refers to the importance of the person. How notorious is the person regarding the subject that needs to be disclosed to the public, and the goals of disclosure. Now, the court doesn't give exact solutions for all the cases of access to information. They're very different. On the other hand, our current framework protects the privacy, and we have the law on protecting private data. Our understanding is that when you have a notorious person and one requests information about that person, now we need to sustain public interest to the detriment of the individual person. I mean here that if you ask information regarding, let's say, incomes of a public person, then that, in this specific case, should be higher. Should be higher on the agenda of public information. I mean, you have to disclose it to the detriment of the private interest. So the same is said by the court. Well, it is clear that the tailoring of the legal framework is very important. And as far as I know, colleagues from the division for the legislation are working on that. I mean, and the Minister of Justice is involved in a number of parallel activities in this area, and we understand that access to information is one of the priorities. But we need to understand that there are others as well which need to be conducted, and not least matters related to the creation of a new institution. We need to treat those from the perspective of other authorities which exist in this country already. There are authorities such as the ombudsman that can be involved in other areas as well. There is quite an intense flow of all public authorities, of many public authorities, when it comes to petitions or requests of information, and the uneven treatment by of the civil society raises questions why there are different standards. Now, this is a problem of clarifying the law, but also an even application or enforcement of the law. And a last point related to reactions from some authorities. We understand that many local public authorities, given the existing circumstances, the number of authorities and their practical capacities, that they could find, shortcomings and respond negatively or ignore them altogether, these information requests. Now, it's also a problem when it comes to joint stock companies and public and state companies. And here I should refer to the element related to the protection of commercial secret. On the one hand, these authorities participate on relevant markets. On the other hand, these institutions, they are funded by the state budget. Now, the current framework is saying that the audit is mandatory. And when the share of the state exceeds 50%, 50 and more, and the same thing is about public procurement. Now, my question is whether this is enough. And very important in the context of subsidies or state aid that I referred to previously. There is an authority which analyzes this from the point of view of competition. I mean, provision of this subsidies or help from the state. And it's actually the responsibility of the entity which provides the state aid to make public this information. I should thank again colleagues for their effort in presenting or for presenting the summary, but also of the report. It was a pleasure to look at it prior to the event. And I'm very interested to see these practical indicators with scoring on those categories which are applicable for authorities where you have identified problems so that we could remedy those. My understanding is that oftentimes it is about application of the law and maybe not the adjustment of the law. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this intervention, Mr. Russo. Now I would like to offer the floor to make a presentation to Primož Vehar, who is the team leader of the EU-funded project Support for a Structured Policy Dialogue, coordination of the implementation of the association agreement, and enhancement of the legal approximation process for the Republic of Moldova. I saw how non-verbally he expressed his consent and his agreement with the results or outcomes of this research. I would like to mention that the recommendations and the volume of work are very important, and I hope that he would also agree with that.
An invitation to this event. I would also congratulate the authors for this report, which is not a classical measurement of legislative situation in the sport, but looks very in details also practical implementation. What is even more important, yeah, okay. Thanks for invitation and congratulations for the report done to the both authors. As I said, this report is not classical evaluation of the legislative framework, but it goes also in practical implementation. And also with developed indicators allows follow-up and measuring also in the future regarding future changes in the progress which will be done in the recent years. My presence here represents also a kind of connection with the European Union, as I'm leading a European project And also my presence shows great cooperation and synergy, which we established as EU-founded project with Freedom House, because we cooperated and we will continue to do so on this area. And I will start with some examples, not from Moldova. Country start building a big monument in the capital city to the hero from the Middle Age. And on the first sight, it's visible, this is a huge investment. People, journalists, NGOs, everybody interested is asking and sending who is financing that, how much it will cost. Government is answering, do not worry, everything will be clear. But we cannot provide you any information because works are still going on. Then was a question, yeah, but you probably planned this, you have some budget or whatever, no reply. Works were finalized, couple of weeks passed, there was a big celebration in the city, monument was opened, and again questions came following to the loan free access to public info. This was public money spent for that. Dear government, tell us how much does it cost? Answer was, we still do not know because bills and invoices from different artists didn't come yet. So we are still collecting. So come later, we will tell you when all bills will come. So we cannot deal with you partial information. And after that, silence. So next example. Public company, 100% state-owned, appointed a new director. Questions come, where was this announcement for job published? What were the criteria for the selection? Answer, silent. Then several questions also asking, how this person was appointed, does it have university degree at all? Because this is probably a condition for such a manager director post. Then answer come. This is information which belongs to personal data protection. We cannot answer you because it's personal data protection about education of our new director. So we will not provide you an answer. Third example, fresh, let's say, related to the COVID situation. Country bought a lot of masks, a lot of respirators, everything. Journalists, NGOs, citizens were asking, how much does it cost? There is no data anywhere to be visible. Obviously, there are millions of euros behind, but how much? What kind of procedures? Answer was, this is state secret. We do not provide any information. We are saving lives. We are in war with the invisible enemy, the virus. And we cannot provide any information. Everything has status of state secret. And so on, and so on. I have a lot of such examples. This was example from the region, from the country, which is negotiating with the European Union. So it's a step forward of Moldova. Let's go to the topic. Our project is EU funded and we are supporting implementation of the association agreement and harmonization of the Moldovan legislation with the EU law. And we will be present here till mid-2025. So additional, how many? 3.5 years. First question, which I heard many times, but there are no regulations, there are no directives on free access to public information. Also, association agreement has no chapter regarding that, and there is not written exactly deadlines and what we have to do. So here I would like to underline, and therefore I give you an example of a country which is negotiating and which negotiations are stopped and do not progress, also because of such issues like not fulfilling political criteria. And also Moldovan Association Agreement in its beginning, immediately in Article 4, says that Moldova will cooperate with the European Union in the areas of developing, consolidating, and increasing the stability and effectiveness of democratic institutions and the rule of law. It looks very general, but here it's hidden a lot of things. So among others, also free access to public information. It said that we'll be ensuring respect for human rights, fundamental freedoms. In the same article, we have judicial reform, fight against corruption, public administration reform, etc., etc. No concrete regulations, directives, European legal acts, because they not exist in such a form of many of these areas, and we cannot use it like that. But area, it's super important. EU has only a directive from 2019 on reuse of public sector data, which is not included in Moldovan legislation at all. But otherwise, all other international standards were already mentioned by my colleagues, David and Stella. So it's a Tromsø Convention of Council of Europe, which Moldova signed in 2016 and which entered into force last year because it got enough signatures. Then there are OECD Sigma Principle of Public Information, also with defining standards specifically regarding proactive disclosure, institutional framework, procedural framework, and there are very detailed World Bank standards on proactive transparency with complete catalog of data, which should be published in advance. And this was underlined by my colleagues, and I'm stressing again, proactive transparency. If data are published, if everything is clear on a web page and everything, there is no need to put questions. If there is a public announcement that will be a tender for a director of a public company, conditions are this and this, criteria are such and such, deadlines and this, expected salary is this and this. Why to put questions? Why to hide that? Why not to publish who was selected? Why not to put the name of the person with short CV? It will be clearly visible. Does he have university degree or not, or has just a middle school or whatever. So, and no questions are needed. Everything it's visible. They are public information. I mean, it's public money. It's our money from taxation for taxes which we are paying. It's not. These are not private companies. I mean, to do whatever they want. If there is a private company, they can employ anybody for any price. Education, yes or no, who cares? I mean, I'm owner. I can employ somebody with no education, so if I wish so. But if I'm a director or of the public company or of the public agency or of the if I'm the minister or whatever, then I have to respect the rules and share public data, specifically because I am playing with your money of citizens and taxpayers, not with mine. This is not my private. So also within our project, also with cooperation with David and cooperation with Freedom House, we also make our analysis already half a year ago, which was a little bit different because it analyzed situation and the same. I mean, we identified the same, almost the same problems and come almost to the same conclusions as Freedom House. So ineffective procedure of access to information upon request. So not possible online, not clear deadlines, mixed with petitions which exist under law and administrative procedure. Then weak guarantees of proactive transparency. It's almost very three basic things requesting what should be published proactively in advance. Lack of supervision. There is no specialized body. I will tell a little bit more how important this is. And as I said, reuse of public sector. Here we have a concrete EU directive. This is not addressed at all. So we are here completely matching with the Freedom House report. And we fully agree that with the report, which is promoting the proactive transparency, this is the heart of the future legislation, that as much as possible has to be in advance presented. And there is less and less questions, because these things you should propose, you should show your budget, your public procurement rules, your employment, your investments, yearly reports. Why this is not publicly available? If you're using public money, if you're a public institution, or if you are state-owned public company. So, and also streamlining the procedure to access to information has to be regulated. We have huge problem here as well as in Moldova with administrative silence. So just no answer. And then you have a problem how to push that you receive an answer. And we also strongly support establishing a supervisory body as positive experience of many countries. We heard that approximately half of the European Union, even more, has such a body. So, but again, we don't have here directives or regulations saying you should have this. So here you have a lot of freedom how to organize. State Secretary Russo already mentioned that there are different possibilities for where to put such a body, if at all. So let's say there are 4 options for models on general. So one is status quo. This is option 0, so we change nothing. Like it is now, should stay without body, anything. The other option is that maybe ombudsman institution can also take this responsibility. We can find that in certain solutions in certain countries, or that you have a joint body, joint agency, for example, for personal data protection and free access to public information. That this is in one body who has then, let's say, 2 departments inside. This is also exists in several countries. For example, from country I'm coming from, and. But of course, legislative changes are needed if you want any kind of changes here. What should do such a specialized body? So definitely collection of data. So to have a register of information holders. So who are these institutions which should provide public information? Is state-owned telecom such an institution or not? Ministry, is it? Is it regulatory agency? Which is has a great autonomy and dependence, such as it, or it's not. Then education and awareness raising. So they have to provide trainings, they have to raise awareness around, provide different guidelines, instructions in a kind of a soft law, and anyhow support among information holders as well as among general public. And of course, it has inspection and review of the situation, especially where you don't have when you have administrative silence or where you don't have a reply, and then it acts as a second level body, as an appeal body. So ministry says we cannot provide you this information. This is personal data protection. Which director we choose, it's not your business. What is her education doesn't matter. This is personal data. We don't give you. And then such a body, specialized body, is it commissioner or is it agency or whatever, says ministry for whatever or the public agency, you should provide this information in the time of, I don't know, 15 days. And has also possibility to impose fines. So to make a penalty, but not just in the institution, then I don't care. I mean, I'm on budget anyway, so ministry will pay, but to the responsible person. And in that case, is it or general secretary or minister or director, if we speak about that. So unfortunately, it does not go otherwise. So. And I will give you an example again from my own country, which is even smaller than Moldova, speaking about Slovenia, where we have a case that government didn't want to disclose certain information about discussion in the governmental session. And it came to the appeal, and the Commissioner for Public Information and Personal Data Protection, in our case is joint, said that this information has to be disclosed in 15 days and make, if not, penalty or appeal to the court. And this was sent directly to the Prime Minister because he's responsible for the government. Prime Minister completely ignored that, didn't do anything. Deadline for access to the court passed, and it became final. And what happened? He was fined. The prime minister was fined to pay, I think it was 500 euro or something like that, because did not disclose the information. And he didn't pay because he said, oh, I will not pay. And then in the enforcement procedure, it was taken from his salary. So this is an example how it works in practice. Follow up. Definitely agree that new legislative framework is needed. Law it's obsolete in any way. I'm deeply convinced that just with amendments it cannot be changed, because you need an amendment almost on every article, at least every second article. So our proposal would be to work on developing on a new law, taking into account international standards, and we are ready to support here as a project. So David also cooperates with us. We have also other experts, comparative experience, also Freedom House. We work in hand to hand. And if Ministry of Justice, I think this is the most appropriate ministry. The same I noticed also in the report of Freedom House, who also identified Ministry of Justice as a proper partner. And I am offering publicly a hand to State Secretary to meet today, tomorrow, whatever, and start discussion on potential cooperation. And already besides our analysis we did in spring, it was in March already, but due to the elections coming changes, it was not a chance to discuss with our Moldovan partners. Would be good to discuss already also our analysis, and we prepared also a skeleton law, draft law, with a typical chapters and articles which should be, and this is a good start for a follow-up cooperation. And I'm very much looking forward to meet colleagues from Ministry of Justice and State Secretary, and my colleagues will do the best to contact you, and that we can continue cooperation here. So much from my side. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eu vreau să vă mulțumesc pentru acest.
Thank you for this very pragmatic approach. I call on meetings and contacts with people from the Ministry of Justice, steps regarding cooperation and legal development. Well, such partnerships are very welcome, and they need to be applauded. Now, getting back to the practical issues, which are not about the researchers and but press. So that is why we have Viorica Zaharie with us. She is the chairwoman of the Press Council from Moldova Press Council. Viorica, how do you see this research and how it's going to be used by journalists? Hi, thank you, Corina. Let me comment when it comes to journalists. This study, besides the fact that I represent the Press Council, I'm also the editor of a portal which is called moldova.md, and which writes articles with investigation elements when it comes to the integrity of public servants on anti-corruption subjects. Well, first and foremost, issues related to access to information affect investigative journalists, and those from news are also investigative journalists. Let me thank you for the study, which actually confirms the situations in which we journalists live every day. As it has been shown by the research, some ministries that are just reaching 50% according to, of compliance actually, with the transparency requirements. Well, what have they published? They haven't published public procurement, they haven't published wages, they haven't published the outcomes of public procurement tenders. Well, this is the information with the highest degree of relevance for people and for the press. Because let us imagine the people are interested in the organigram of an institution. Well, okay, but they're interested in what this institution does every day. for 4 years or for shorter or longer period of time, what decisions it makes, how do they allocate the public money, who do they subsidize, who is the winner of the tender. Let me tell you that this information regarding procurement, it is not asked, it's not offered even upon request. They say it's private data. And one case which I recollect from my experience is this: I've requested data from an authority which provides subsidies to farmers, and I requested a report regarding public procurement tenders. They left unblurred the names of businesses who won the tender, but they blurred the members of the working committee who are public servants. And then I was investigating a conflict of interest to see if the members of the working group were in conflict of interest when they have given money to someone from public companies. I couldn't find out. Why? Because the institution protected these people. They protected the private data of these people, which is an abuse, I think. Now, when it comes to the degree of transparency, let me tell you that there is such a portal, actelocale.mg. This is our pain of journalists. On that portal, actelocale.mg, you have all the decisions, all the rulings of public authorities, district councils, local councils from villages, etc. And what I'm looking there is how these authorities respond to controls of financial inspectors. I am interested in public money and how they spend them. There you'll find decisions. And I printed one here. All of the decisions are blurred excessively. I mean, even the name of the mayor, the secretary, everything is blurred, it's deleted. So the signature is part of private data, but the name, what about the name? I found town halls which blurred the name of the town hall. Look, I understand that this happens as a result of some trainings done by the Center for the Protection of Private Data. And unfortunately, I wasn't at any of those trainings. For journalists, they don't do the trainings. I have the feeling that public servants understand it. They misunderstand the way they should protect private data. So I've been thinking that journalists have to initiate, I don't know, some discussions, a dialogue with the Center for Private Data, because this is, we are out of this equation. But I think the center has a role when it comes to what happens now with this data. As a result of these trainings that either public servants don't understand correctly, or I don't know what they teach them there, but we have what we have. We have this kind of decisions and disclosure of data. Then I'm asking myself, why would you make public these decisions? Why a public servant lose time? Look how much time you lose to blur all the data. This is public money. I mean, he's there on his job. Instead of doing something else efficient for the committee, he's hiding the data. Why? Because this decision shouldn't be understood. This is a formal understanding of what transparency is. Okay, let us get back to other topics. Now, you were talking about what? About the different approaches and about weird answers, as Stella said, right? I have here an example, and I'll tell you, I've been working for more than 20 years in press, and for the first time in this time, I've received, upon a request for data, an answer from Gagauzia prosecution, where they tell me that they don't give me information about the fact that the candidate for the function of MP on the region, whether he has or doesn't have a criminal case, they don't give this information because there is the risk of violation of the right and interests or reputation of the person. It's for the first time that I see such a comment, such an argumentation. I mean, if you give you information, we violate people's reputation. I mean, tell me, why would prosecution care about reputation of a person and not public interest? I mean, a candidate who should be an MP, the press has much more right to find out things about him if he has criminal cases, if he's on the record, if not. But fortunately, I requested the same information to the Prosecution General of Moldova, and here I have the answer. Yes, he had a criminal case which was classified. All right, so these two structures are guided by different structures, or they function in different countries. Well, the worst part here is that after I've received this information from the Gagauzia prosecution, I've asked prosecution general to verify whether, though the Gagauzia prosecution refused to give me the data. They said, well, they said that this will be verified and controlled, and I said that according to the law, they've done everything according to the law. So I gave you this example to tell you that the conclusions, your conclusions about different approaches, are confirmed in practice, in everyday practice of journalists. So we saw the Ministry of Education listed among the least receptive to the request for information. And here, this year, I had something unprecedented. For the first time in my life, I've made a complaint to police so that they can sanction the lack of answer to request for information. And this was Ministry of Information. And there was nothing uncommon. And this was a request about, well, a finding of the Court of Accounts that some money disappeared when they were rebuilding a school from belts. I only asked the ministry to tell me who was responsible, how did it end up in this situation, etc. Well, I didn't ask for salaries or something like this. For 3 months, I've been calling, 15 days have passed. I've been calling ministry, they were telling me that, well, the answer is ready, it is with the minister. It is on the table of the minister. I don't know what to tell you. Well, it's there on the minister's table. I thought that this attitude is totally irresponsible. This was a mockery. And that is in line with what you're saying here, strengthening institutional capacities to answer. Well, the law is there, everything is there, but look at the attitude they had. So, you were talking about accountability. Yes, I feel a need to have an accountability mechanism for failure to supply information or failure to ensure transparency, because the data center supervises the way institutions provide private data, but I don't know if they supervise when they depersonalize the data. I don't know if there is any institution, I haven't heard of it. You know, and also Stella was saying that they don't take into account public interest. Indeed. So when we request information from them, from public service, is that somehow they're not fined. Well, but the fact that they don't care about public, well, they don't care. You know, oftentimes the spokespersons are telling me that, well, we don't want to be fined, and probably we'll give you some information. Now, or suing them in the court by the journalist. Well, for some institutions, I don't want to generalize, this is a salvation, because they say, okay, we don't argue anymore, sue us in the court. And I know that if we sue them, that will take 2 years. Information that nobody will need it because it is relevant now, but it will be irrelevant in 2 years. Well, that is actually sometimes a salvation for the institutions to sue them in the court. So the tool of penalizing them through police, I've done this for the first time. And the institution didn't respond again. But there was this only one person from the ministry who was made responsible. So there are two mechanisms of accountability, which are extreme ones, which we should not use, but very rarely use. And I don't want them to be used because, you know, public services say, well, you sue them and you sue us and that's all. You know, that will block the activity of the journalist, but also the activity of the society will be blocked because we will be in trials, but will not provide quality and necessary information to the public. That's all from me. Yeah, I guess that is all the ideas that I wanted to share with you regarding this report. Thank you very much for that. Thank you so much. I was saying at the beginning that we hear the same from other journalists, investigative journalists. We hear them at meetings with diplomatic missions, meetings, public meetings. They're talking about this all the time. This is a problem of culture and understanding of the mission of the public servant and the understanding of the law and what is the importance of the public money, of our taxes, and what should be the liability of the institutions when it comes to transparency. All right, so Elena Russo, State Secretary of Ministry of Justice, wanted to say something. Did you want to say something? We ask him to connect. Yeah, just wanted to mention that when it comes to availability to discuss, wanted to discuss. We're open. We're open to talk to you about legal initiatives and to see what has been prepared by the team, as well as to see how we can move forward in the future. Sure, we're open for discussions and to hear all the initiatives which exist. Thank you. This is a confirmation of the openness of this ministry. Everybody here will take note of this and will use this opportunity and this openness. In the meantime, we have some questions. I have to. First of all, when it comes to the methodology of this research, this is a question to David. Tell me if we can do this in other countries, whether we could use this methodology, if we could replicate it, if we could compare ourselves with other countries from the neighborhood, or compare ourselves to the benchmark with other countries.
Of course, this methodology is kind of a universal tool for measuring transparency of public institutions. Of course, for example, the construction of the sample, some specific aspects of measuring accessibility to information upon request. This has to be adjusted, like standardized request has to be adjusted to the legal framework of each country, but the approach is kind of universal one. It combines insights from studies conducted in many countries, and I think it could be also used internationally after local adjustments and with some element of comparability. I mean, it would enable to compare the situation in various countries, show who is lagging behind, who is progressing better. It's first time I had an opportunity to apply this kind of comprehensive approach. As I mentioned in the past, I worked on assessments of the legislation mainly for Sigma, for other international partners. This time we got the opportunity, and I would like to thank Freedom House, Tatiana, for this initiative. To do much more in-depth analysis, not only legislation, but also going into the field. And I think these insights presented today by Stella and corresponding very much to what Viorica said about experience of journalists. This already gives a very solid foundations for diagnostic foundation for changes. I would also like to thank journalists, investigative journalists, and all the press community in Moldova, because you were in the avant-garde of promoting transparency. Without your efforts in the past, now the progress towards greater transparency would not be and will not be possible. So I think we should just join the forces. I'm also very happy to hear that Primoz is and project EU project is very much keen on supporting this process. So I think this creates an excellent conditions for progress in this area.
Thank you so much.
And the question to Stella Pavlou, there's one in the chat related to my question. Do you plan to sue those who didn't answer or answered inconsistently? And the question comes from ANI regarding their answer, Agency for, I think, for Integrity. Thank you, Corina. I'll answer to the National Integrity Authority. Well, not accidentally did I, it's not by accident did I put the questions that we've sent so that we can clearly show which were the specific questions, what specific information we requested. Yes, indeed, the ANI has answered and provided procurement plans for 2020-2021, and we have requested a copy of reports regarding the outcomes of other procurement, open, restricted tenders, but the Integrity Authority provided to us monitoring reports of procurement. So not exactly what we asked for. Well, they answered, thank you very much, but it wasn't really the information requested from them. Second question regarding whether we will sue anyone. Well, I work with the Lawyers for Human Rights NGO that I mentioned. And I told you that they strive to ensure there's more access to information for public. And I should mention here that oftentimes we do that. We sue authorities. First of all, we send information requests and see how they answer. And if they don't answer, or they don't answer to all the questions, we don't sue them. We have now more than 40 rulings or court rulings, favorable to us. So we reached the Supreme Court of Justice. Now we have a case which has been sent to the European Court of Human Rights. We wait for the solution. So for this information request and the authorities which didn't answer, or didn't appropriately answer, we will think, and we'll think with the colleagues of the association whether we will sue them or not. We'll give them one more chance, actually, for next time to answer to our information requests. Yes, and a question, I think we can say yes or no from the TV from Judicial. It's about the salaries, top-ups and premiums of the management, of the leadership of the district council. Is this a secret or not? Well, public servants from district councils, they are, well, I mean, look, they're public servants, right? I mean, they have functions of public responsibility. Well, this is public information, and it should be made public, and it should be offered upon demand. Well, when I made the presentation about different approaches and different answers, how an authority, for instance, the apparatus of the presidency or the Court of Accounts or another authority offered to us these responses, and on every month, every salary top up and premium, other authorities said, well, sorry, but this is private data and the salary is confidential. Well, excuse me, but they're public servants, they're paid from public money, and this information must be public. Thank you very much for the answers. This is a pleasure for me to moderate this event and to know the international experts, to see you again here. And my mission was fulfilled almost perfectly. We ended at 12 sharp. Now I'll monitor and see what happens in our project in the future, and we will cooperate through our partners in this project. I mean, media and project supported by USAID and by UK. And now the closure of the meeting will be done by the Tatiana. Thank you very much, everyone. Indeed, I think that this report has shed more light on the actual situation regarding legal aspects and the need to amend legal framework on access to information. The opinions are different. Well, we still believe that amendments, adjustments to the legal framework, existing one, are necessary by all means, because we have a law which was approved in 2000. 20 years, 21 years have passed. The reality has changed. Now, another development is entry into force of the Tromsø Convention, access to official documents. A treaty which is not regional but international, the first treaty which will monitor how things are when it comes to access to information in states which ratify the convention, which means that the governments will have to report how things stand, when it comes to access to information. And on our behalf, let me tell you that we have strived to contribute to amending legal framework ever since 2018 with the support of the EU, with the support of the European Council of Europe. We have created a parliamentary group which at the time had the purpose to wanted to improve the legal information of mass media. Look, access to information at that point in time was one of the priorities and pillars which is important even today. Unfortunately, Moldova has gone through certain political changes, and we could not build a dialogue with previous governments. The legal framework was not logically followed. I mean, amendments to the law haven't gone through the parliament when it comes to amending and approval by the MPs of the law. Well, just to make one thing clear, the work which has been done with the support of all the civil society, of the developer partners regarding amendments that Liliana Onofre spoke. And I'd like to thank the lady for the fact that she mentioned the fact that these amendments are now in legal procedure. We hope and for sure we will participate in this effort. Now, what I wanted to say again, and what has been mentioned by the experts, is that when we have made those amendments, we only took into account the needs of the press. But we understand that a more comprehensive approach is necessary. And we have seen that in the government's action plan, the Ministry of Justice will be responsible for either the development of the new law on access to information or amendment of the law and of the related legislation. And we're happy that the State Secretary has expressed his openness towards this effort. And, I should also say this, only together and with a sustained effort will we obtain what we need to obtain to make the decision-making more transparent and ensure the access of mass media to information and to ensure the good governance in a democratic society. Thank you very much to all of you for participation. We'd like to thank the interpreters and all the technical support people, my colleague, Melissa Grambus, who was behind all of this and ensure that everything runs smoothly. I would like to thank speakers from the panel, and not least, all the authorities and representatives of the authorities which have been delegated and participated in today's event. Well, it tells me that we have more than 100 participants which are following us on the Zoom platform. Well, this figure is good because I think the conclusions and recommendations will be taken into consideration. And please don't hesitate to offer comments, which maybe you don't have now immediately now, but which can appear in the meantime. Well, I declare this event closed. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day going forward. Thank you.